What is happening, J Gamer Dude here, and this was easily one of the biggest pieces of news that I didn't cover immediately when it happened, because I thought I would kind of wait, sit down, and just kind of see what the deal is, what's going on here. And I think I have a pretty good idea now of what's going on and kind of what it's going to look like. So, let's talk about how Microsoft has ordered Xbox that there is no red line when it comes to releasing their games on other platforms. So the idea of Xbox is that they have their group of exclusives, just like PlayStation, just like Nintendo. And that's usually what defines a console, a platform. You can only get those particular games in those locations. If you want to play God of War, you have to be on PlayStation. If you want to play Mario, you have to be on Nintendo. If you want to play Halo, you would have to be on Xbox. But the question is, how much longer will that last statement be true? That if you want to play Halo, it has to be on Xbox. How much longer is that statement going to be true? It seems like it might not be all that much true, at least not that much longer it seems like. Because Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, has told the Xbox gaming division that there is no red line to what... Oh, actually, let me just read the quote here. That might be a lot better. But privately, Microsoft is reportedly pushing for no red line at all around which games Xbox will eventually launch on PlayStation and Nintendo platforms in a bid to increase margins. This all stems from the idea and the fact that Xbox has gotten too big. So initially when Xbox started, they made their console, they made their own games, they got the blessings of Bill Gates, and so they released the console onto the world. A lot of people latched onto it and it continued on. It was far more of a success than the Amiga. It was much more of a success than the TurboGrafx. Like, there were these old other consoles that just were not doing all that well back in the day. And so for Xbox to somehow be able to enter a highly competitive market and maintain its relevancy, at least to some extent, not in the best possible way, but certainly did do well if nothing else. Well enough to stay alive. They were able to stay alive in a highly competitive field. Now, with the purchase of Activision, which is kind of where all of this is going to ultimately circle around to, and spending a very nice, I'm going to round up here, $69 billion, it has caused Microsoft to take more notice of Xbox, because now Xbox is not this little pet project anymore. It's gotten so many more people involved. There's so much money being funneled into Xbox that the money that was actually spent to purchase Activision was actually from Microsoft, and now Xbox has to pay that money back. Now, what I think is that now Xbox is indebted to Microsoft, and so Microsoft is going to try and get that money back. But if that money can't be paid back, then Microsoft is then going to try and take full control of Xbox, thus turning Xbox into Microsoft Gaming. And I did that with like my hands and fingers doing like the whole air quotation things. Just imagine that. And this does largely relate to a piece of news that happened earlier on, I think last week or the week before, I can't quite remember. Actually, no, it was when the 4 Bethesda studios were shut down, where Xbox founders are reportedly mourning the loss of the company's identity within Microsoft and refer to it as Microsoft Gaming, also with those quotation marks. And I kind of agree with that sentiment, albeit that, you know, it might be a bit much to say that, you know, Xbox is going to be indebted to Microsoft so that Microsoft can then take full control of Xbox. Yes, it is true that Microsoft owns Xbox, but the thing is that Xbox is an arm of a significantly larger company in the form of Microsoft. So the idea is that at least like Xbox had its identity separate from Microsoft, because the thing is, when I think of Xbox, I think of Xbox games. I don't immediately think of Microsoft. Keeping in mind that Microsoft is very much a conglomerate. Now, with games like Sea of Thieves and Grounded, as well as Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment now being sold on other platforms, it's clear that Sea of Thieves and Grounded are actually doing far better on other platforms than they did on their home soil. So it does kind of make sense for Microsoft to want to make more money. And I thought about something that was actually quite interesting, which is that when it comes to Microsoft, I don't believe that they're in the console gaming business for the games. They're in it to make money, as with all companies are, but it feels like they're making a console so that people who buy the console make Microsoft money, but then if Microsoft makes games and puts it on all platforms, the sales from those Microsoft games will go back to Microsoft. All those Xbox games straight back to Microsoft. So I think the idea is that Microsoft is only in the console gaming business to make money. So if they stop actually making consoles and just make games, they may actually be better off making more money that way. But in saying that, this whole idea of there being no red line has caused a bit of a tiff, let's put it that way, internally within Microsoft. And that's interesting because I'm sure that, like, you know, Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond and those guys are trying to keep Microsoft from completely taking over management of Xbox from them, and instead having Microsoft people in there rather than Xbox people, so to speak. And then I remembered that SkillUp actually made a video called The Activisioning of Xbox, where Activision was known as a really good publisher back in the day, but ultimately turned into nothing more than a Call of Duty machine as time had gone on. And now we find ourselves back into the situation where we now have something called Project Horizon, which is in reference to this whole idea of putting games across all platforms and not just leaving it only on Xbox, or pushing the idea of, again, there being no red line. And it kind of sucks because if the Xbox doesn't have exclusives, then no one will buy an Xbox. The only people who will are those that are too deep-seated within the ecosystem, and even then, at some point, when they do stop making a console, you're gonna lose everything. That is the concern around, hell, even the idea and concept of the digital future. However, Microsoft not making a console is very much out there as like an estimation on how things could go, but it doesn't feel that unrealistic, if that makes sense. Because keeping in mind, Nintendo's old sparring partner Sega did just that. They made consoles, they made games, they fell out of the console business after the failure of the Sega Saturn, and PlayStation came swooping in as another form of competition for Nintendo. And guess what? The PlayStation won that console war, that specific generation, as they entered in with their first attempt at a console. And yet Sega is doing just fine. But now, rather than what we had to deal with in the 90s, we now have to deal with the idea and concept of a digital ownership and digital marketplaces, and also the fact that we all have digital libraries if we bought anything from the Xbox marketplace or the PlayStation Store to that effect. So I thought, you know what? This might be the most realistic scenario to then pose the question, what kind of Xbox exclusives would you like to see on PlayStation? So I have 3 here that I wanted to kind of share. Granted, a couple of them are on PC, but I would still like to see them on PlayStation regardless. So let's just kind of jump into that. I don't think there was actually much more that I was wanting to say. I'll come back to this last paragraph afterwards, but yeah. So the first game that I wanted to talk about was Brute Force. I understand that this game is... I don't know why it's treated as a meme. Maybe I just don't get it, but like, I've had this game since the launch of the original Xbox. I still have my copy upstairs, and I was playing it last week, which is actually kind of weird to think about. To me, the shooting in this game, the squad mechanics, still hold up. Each of the characters have a specific ability, and it is a 4-player shooter where you're a team of 4 that go through missions, and I think there's only 18 missions in the game if I remember right. You go through, complete missions, and you're following sort of like the sort of campaign. A big draw to the game was the fact you could use System Link to have up to large numbers of players in split screen across multiple Xboxes system linked together to do stuff like deathmatch, team deathmatch, capture the flag, and a lot of other things. But the main concept around it is how the 4 characters have different abilities, and you can then command them to do things like go over there, follow me, stay in that one location, or use your ability, or something along those lines. Like, for example, the guy at the back is Tex. He carries like... so every character can carry up to 2 weapons, but Tex can actually dual wield his weapons. That's why he's kind of got giant muscles. Or the lady on the right with red hair, her name is Hawk, and she can turn herself invisible. And she has like this special blade that she can, like, you know, use to instantly kill a couple of enemies sort of here and there. That's just the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. But yeah, had a lot of fun. Great game. Holds up a little bit, probably not as well as it would, but then again, this game came out near the launch of the Xbox, the original Xbox. In fact, I think it might have been a launch game. I got this and Midtown Madness 3 in the same bundle, so there's that too. Next game on the list that I kind of wanted to bring forward was Sudeki. Though granted, this is actually available on PC, and I actually might buy it and play it, but I had a lot of fun playing through this game. So much fun. Sudeki was so good. So yeah, I certainly would love to see that on PlayStation as well. And then finally we have another game that's on PC. I think it came out on PC in 2017. It's on Steam. But I'd still like to see it on PlayStation. Jade Empire, which was actually made by BioWare when they were still good. Well, they were good until like the end of the Mass Effect trilogy, and then after that they kind of, you know, screwed things up royally with every release that they made thereafter. And that very much includes Dragon Age Inquisition for people who are really trying to hold back on the fact that they still think that the game is good when it's quite easily probably one of the weakest Dragon Age games that has released. And also the fact that they also made Anthem, but I digress. Jade Empire, still a great game. Granted, it can barely run anymore because it's a really old game from, I think, 2004? 2005. So yeah, the game really doesn't hold up on PC because you need to do a few things to kind of really be able to run it properly. Otherwise, it just does not run all that well at all. But yeah, I think just kind of sum things up ultimately, again, for games that you kind of want to see also on PlayStation from the Xbox, please feel free to chuck them into the comments below. But I did kind of want to finish off the video with this last paragraph because this is kind of, I feel like, adding to the whole argument of like what the heck is going on with Xbox. The philosophy of a great video game platform holder is that it makes money in order to make more consoles and more games. The philosophy of Microsoft, and by dint of that, Xbox, is evidently that it only makes consoles and games in order to make money. Eurogamer's Chris Tapsell wrote last week, Like so many businesses owned by gigantic, publicly traded mega companies, Xbox is now stuck in a cycle of thinking back to front. It, and I suspect much of the video game world, no longer knows why it exists. If it has no exclusives, what is the draw to the console? If it continues to exist in a state of not having any exclusivity or any draw to want people to purchase it, buy it, or to continue being within that very ecosystem, then ultimately the question then begs, why does it exist? That is so very true. And with all of that said and done, let me know what you guys think about all of what I've just said in this video, into the comments below, your suggestions for games you'd like to come to PlayStation from the Xbox. Granted, I picked a lot of really older original Xbox titles because very much I am blinded by nostalgia at this point, as games did used to be a hell of a lot more fun then than now, but maybe it might be because we're of a different age. Granted, games don't look as good, and probably don't play as well, but they still were fun given our perspective at the time, and maybe things aren't all that much better. With all that being said, especially with some of the quotes and references that I've kind of made as well, let me know what you guys think about all that in the comments. With all that said and done, like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 200 subs by the end of the year, and with all that said and done, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.